to the podcast. We are Hoshirio. I'm Kaiko, an energy worker.
And my name is Fernando. I'm a psychologist.
So in this episode, we're going to explore how we could possibly compromise our creative energy. Is there any name for it?
Yes, there is a name, and some of you perhaps already read it in the description. Now, for all the audience there, I would like to ask you these questions to see if this resonates with you. So the first question is, do you view what you do or your success as just a result of good luck, or maybe it was just something that happened out of casualty? Do you, for example, feel concerned about maybe people finding out that maybe you're not that creative enough, smart enough, prepared enough? You're scared to be seen as a fraud or as something that is not fit for what people actually think you are. Or also, do you actually struggle accepting praise? Do you struggle when people say thank you and you're like, no, thank you? Is this something that happens to you? If you answer yes to some of these questions, you may be struggling with what we call
Imposter Syndrome.
Imposter Syndrome. And today's episode is really about that. It's about Imposter Syndrome, or also known as Imposter Phenomenon. Yet this episode is about reframing Imposter Syndrome, looking at it from a different perspective. So we're going to be talking about that.
Okay. So what is really Imposter Syndrome?
Essentially, it's a pattern. It's a psychological pattern, and some of the characteristics is that people who deal with it, which I think all of us in one way or the other, have suffered from it, is really doubting your accomplishments, and the fear that you feel about this is persistent. It is really about being afraid of being exposed as a fraud, as an imposter. It's like feeling that you're not good enough and needing to hide away by always either accomplishing something or never really putting yourself out in the spot.
I see.
Now, this is a pattern that started in our childhood. It may not be a surprise for a lot of us, but it did start in our childhood, and it has to do with the context and where your needs, either they were not met or you had to struggle just to try to meet your needs. The context can be, if you grew in an environment where there was a lot of competition, in an environment where there was actually scarcity, also an environment where there was, what is the word?
Socially oppressed.
Socially oppression is also a characteristics and why people may develop that sense. You grow up feeling that in order for you to be able to receive, but to be able to accomplish, in order for you to get your needs met, you have to either overwork or you have to be constantly doing something. And at the same time, you're feeling that it's never enough. Some of the other characteristics that are part of the imposter phenomenon is essentially people do struggle recognizing their skills, their progress, because again, they don't feel good enough. And they can become at the same time not just focusing on super high Olympic standards, impossible standards, but also they at the same time can be very critical of themselves and very demanding of themselves at the same time. Now, another characteristics of people that suffer from this is that they may tend to compare themselves with other people's success. They compare their success with other people's success, which kind of puts them in this loop, endless circle.
So what can we do about it?
In essence, the invitation after going through the material and really looking into what is imposter syndrome, I really feel this imposter syndrome is actually an invitation to authenticity. I really like to reframe it in that way.
Yeah.
Because we're calling something, it is telling us or is sending us a message that something needs change. Something requires to be in a different way. When I see this imposter syndrome as a call for authenticity, my relationship with that pattern becomes softer.
Okay.
And I really feel that this is very important to have a softer relationship with that pattern. Our bodies are always sending us messages. And truly what the body is just trying to tell us is that we need to keep expanding and growing. And I think it's the message that the body tells us when we feel that anxiety, when we feel that concern, when we feel all that doubt. It basically means that something is changing. Something cannot be sustained in the same way. So for me, that makes a little bit more sense. It's an invitation for growth. It's an invitation for authenticity. And also, one of the key things about the imposter syndrome, people who have it actually means that they're living from integrity. So if you're struggling with this, actually what that means is that you're living through integrity because you care.
Right.
Maybe that caring is on overdrive, but it means that you really care. You want to do things in the right way. You want to really deliver or offer something that is good for yourself and others. But maybe it's just, as I said, on working on overdrive, and that's the part that we need to relate in a different way, in a softer way.
So how does it look like?
When people are struggling with imposter syndrome or that invitation for authenticity, that moment of it's time to grow, we confront ourselves with our own childhood wounds, actually. Okay. These wounds, in many ways have to do with how we learn to relate or how we learn to connect, with our contacts, meaning our family, our school system, our friends, and how we learn to connect or receive love or to be attached. And as we grow older, what happens is that there's a couple of examples. One of them is and if you may identify with one of these, there's the perpetual over-preparing person that will take action as soon as he studies that seminar, as soon as you study that course, as soon as you finish that diplomat, one step more, and I'm gonna be perfect. And they can continue just studying and never really take action. And they do this because they want to do it perfectly, but also is that they are afraid what if they don't have enough information? What if it's not good enough? So they're always chasing perfection, which is an illusion. And then there's this other person which can have difficulties with procrastination. Now, somebody that procrastinates, what is procrastination? People that deal with procrastination are essentially, it's not necessarily an issue of time management. It's an issue of trying to avoid something that has been so painful for them in the past that they develop a way of avoiding, taking action. Unfortunately, for those who have to meet a deadline, they could change from procrastination to adrenaline addiction, and they can start doing stuff at the last week or the last day or even the last hour, which can be very detrimental for their health or well-being. They spend a lot of energy, both of them. I think they spend a lot of energy. But this is not only if they would happen to succeed in what they're doing. The one that over prepares, if they find success in what they're doing, they may end up not believing that it was because that success belonged to them. It's like, they minimize it, or like, it was because I worked pretty hard, but it will just happen once, it's going to be very hard if it happens again. The same for the one that procrastinates. The one that procrastinates essentially is, it's like, it was just luck, or it was like, it was just a casualty, and so on.
So you talked about reframing. How does it work? Like, how can we change our relationship with it?
Well, when it comes to, this call for authenticity and this remembering that your body is just telling you, it's inviting you to grow, it's inviting you to change. I'll start with that, is being very specific, start journaling. Now, journaling is great. I recommend journaling for all of my clients that I see. And there is a specific way of journaling, specifically for what the topic that we're talking about. You want to journal your successes. You want to write down your successes. You want to be very accurate. Bring all the things that have been a success for you, all the projects that you've been successful with, all what people have said that you have had an impact on their lives. Write them all down. This is going to help you. Now, another thing is when 50% or part of the work is to be aware of the patterns. Be aware that this is just a pattern. This is a survival mechanism that corresponds to a younger version of yourself that needed to have their needs met and that develop a way of meeting those needs through overachieving, through avoiding, through procrastinating, because it wanted to avoid pain. It wanted to avoid being on the spot, on the limelight, having the possibility of being a fraud or a failure, which is not true. Yet there needs to be a balance between being aware of that. So when that sensation comes, notice that the sensation that's coming is from a younger version of yourself. It's not from the age that you are right now. But your body, your mind doesn't know that. Logically, we understand it, but our emotional brain doesn't. So that's one part of it. So there's awareness, and then the other part is exposure. The only way of getting through, development, imposter, phenomenon, or the invitation to grow is by exposing yourself. And you can do this in a very controlled settings. You can do this by actually talking with people about, what do they think about this experience? It needs to be someone that you can share your stories with. Now, if you see this, then there's awareness of the patterns, and then there's exposure to take action. These two need to be framed or need to be sustained by compassion. So we need to be compassionate with these patterns and learn to have a different relationship with ourselves. Now, again, you can share your stories. You can share your quote, quote, failures. But again, Kaiko, I think it's very important to redefine what we understand by failure.
Right.
No?
So how can we redefine our failure?
Essentially, one of the things that I remember, I follow this guru from India. It's called Sadhguru. And in an interview, he was talking about he saw himself as a successful failure.
Oh, I like that.
Successful failure. What this means is that he had a profound and just humble acceptance that no matter how much he served, no matter how much he did, he would never reach his goal. And essentially, this is something that we need to understand. Perfectionism is impossible.
Right.
So I really like what he said about, being a successful failure. Accepting that nobody knows everything. We all know different things. We all gonna make mistakes, and we need to redefine what a mistake is. We navigate life, from a fix-it perspective. There's something to fix, but in reality, there's nothing to fix. It's more the perspective is about this is the growing process. This is how we expand. That's the nature of life itself. Which brings us to the next takeaway, which is receive. Learn to receive. Learn to accept. Very simple. When somebody says, thank you, you helped me. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate what you do. I enjoy listening to you, or I am really grateful for what you do. You simply say, you're welcome. So learn to receive. You may feel a little bit anxious, awkward, that's because you are building that muscle, that emotional muscle.
Yeah.
You're strengthening it. So in order for you to strengthen that, emotional muscle, you need to feel a little bit of pain to grow that muscle. You're welcome. All right.
So that's all for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. I must say that this was a topic that we chose because, of course, Kayako and I were talking about we struggled with our own imposter syndrome, of course. That said, this was a topic that was actually very healing also for us as well.
To do.
Yeah, so we thought that it was very convenient also to confront, our own fears, to talk about this topic. So I hope, from both of us that you enjoyed our conversation, and thank you. Thank you. So remember to stay curious and keep creating.
Keep creating.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.